Great. So it shows us on YouTube and on Facebook. I will momentarily be looking around here to double check. Great. So as I am finishing up my shares, for those of you that have started tuning in, please give me a comment, a hello, or just a compliment, since we both, or all three of us, have survived another week of madness. So, all right. Terrific. I see Jerry. I also see Peter Brissett and a couple other people that are on here with us. So while I get started with the introduction to this video and why we do these videos, please be sure that as you're watching or tuning in, you start engaging with us. You can do so by commenting on our broadcast. At the bottom of this broadcast, you'll see a comment section. This is where you can place if you just want to let us know you can hear us fine, you can see us. Thank you. Peter knows that I'm technically challenged, so when I do a good job of something, he likes to reward me by pointing it out. So you have the comment section available to you to provide us with comments, good morning messages, to let us know if you pick up information that you were unaware of before this broadcast. I like to call them the nuggets of knowledge, or things that you just now are learning or have picked up from the conversation. And then more importantly, because we like to be very engaging, we like to hear questions that you might have. So as our experts are speaking to us, please be sure to ask any questions that you might have. We'll filter those into the discussion and also have them at the very end. Good morning to you as well, Wayne Anderson. As you can see, all the comments and questions will be pulled up onto the screen. So hopefully you have a profile picture like Wayne does that you are quite proud of for us to display for you. Now, I am Juliette Abdel, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. And if you have not seen our broadcasts before, then you're in for a nice treat. We do these on a daily basis. They're held generally at 11 a.m. Every now and then we'll filter in town halls and job fairs and things of that nature that will hit around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, these date back into March. You'll actually find a lot of our videos on the video section of this Facebook page. And while we are streaming this on Facebook, it is actually also streamed on our YouTube channel, Westminster Chamber of Commerce. So if you haven't found us on YouTube or know of people that do not like Facebook and prefer the other platform, direct them over there. And of course, if you've missed any of the previous broadcasts and don't necessarily want to stream them on any of the social networks, you can find them on our COVID resource hub at westminsterchamber.biz, COVID-19 updates. And that link has been included for you in the comment section as well. Now, these videos are designed to educate you about things going on in our community. They're branded as COVID-19 because they kicked off when COVID-19 started, really to impact the community at large. And so we brought in experts from the business community to help you adapt your business, from online ordering to virtual meetings to engaging your workforce that might not be used to this new normal that you have to essentially create for them. Now they're more structured. We kick off the week with our mayor, and throughout the week we feature a business story, which we've held Luan Technology this past Tuesday. We have an expert or a town hall that's generally on Wednesday. So if you've missed our transportation one with CADA and Freedom to Drive, that's available to you as well. And then on Thursdays, we have our nonprofit corner. So Lloyd Lewis from Arc Thrift was our guest yesterday. And I cannot summarize into words how amazing they are, but outside of the mission that they generally do and adhering to even during this time, they are servicing our community through a variety of outlets. So this ends the week with our Friday broadcast, and today's broadcast is doubly important to me because it's a topic I love, but I also have two amazing guests. As many of you have already probably seen their names and know who they are, Lynn Bartles is with us, and she has a host of interests that she's been involved in the past, from even connecting with me in Oklahoma and writing about some issues that took place down there to from our capital, and of course to state offices and things of that nature. And then of course we have Honorable Sherry John. You may have seen some of the impact that she's made whenever she held her state role as a representative and then moved over to Senate, but is still actively engaged in the community even till this day. So our broad topic for today's discussion is Colorado politics. It's voter involvement in a season that things are a little bit different than usual. And so I'll have both of our experts guide this conversation, but we will rely on the comments and questions that you post to be able to help us engage and answer anything that you would like us to steer this conversation to. That being said, I've hogged up to 5 minutes. Lynn, I'm going to mute myself. It is yours to take over.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. I had covered politics for a large part of my journalistic career. I actually started as a police reporter, and then when they assigned me to the legislature, I said, now they have me covering white collar crime, which was just a joke because Colorado was painfully boring and honest compared to New Mexico, where I had moved from. I've known Sherry forever. I'm sorry, I've got the Italian hand waving thing. I say, I've known Sherry forever. I covered her in the House and the Senate. She was kind of always that voice among Democrats on behalf of business. And then I think it was interesting when she switched to unaffiliated. I actually moved here. When I moved here, I registered as a Democrat because I heard Republicans had the larger number. Eventually, I became unaffiliated briefly, switched to Republican, and now I'm unaffiliated again. And that's it's. I look on Twitter and other things. The number of people who used to be Republicans or work for Republicans or work for the Republican Party who are now unaffiliated is pretty interesting. And I think we find it more interesting when they're Republicans than when we're Democrats, although Sherry made big time news when she did that. What's interesting is for a long time, unaffiliated voters were the third voting bloc in Colorado, the third largest. And now they're the largest, and they just keep growing. And I know that frustrates the parties, but it's there. 2 years ago was the first time they could vote in the primary election. There was a ballot measure. My boss at the time, Wayne Williams, the Republican Secretary of State, Wayne opposed that ballot measure. Actually, so did I. Because my theory was you could already go vote. You just ask for the Republican or the Democrat ballot and you could vote. But under the new thing, you didn't have to, change. You could just get a ballot sent to you. I think Wayne Williams did a phenomenal job of educating the public about that. The big concern was that a couple of other states that had done that had a really high rejection rate because you could only send in one ballot. You vote the Republican ballot or you vote the Democrat ballot, and people turned in two. So they thought it could be as high as 7%. But I think because of just a brilliant campaign by Forte Advertising, who worked with Wayne in the Secretary of State's office, that rate was only 2.4%. And Sherry, you can address this because, you were at the press conferences, you did all that.
Well, and it was a really big deal press conference because for years, unaffiliated voters really felt like they didn't have a voice, that it really didn't matter. And the press conference really brought everything together with the legislation that they, of course, had just run, which I did support, making sure that the unaffiliated had a seat at the table. Yes, they could always choose to, ask for a Democrat primary ballot or a Republican. They could always do that. But it just made a difference in our messaging that they really count and their voice really did matter.
Well, I think what's also interesting is it used to be like if you looked at an election, it was really well, it probably still is, it's the unaffiliated who call the shots and who wins or loses. And for the most part, they have tended to follow the national trend. And for the most part, not always. And so it would always be, can you woo the unaffiliateds? Well, now they're so big and powerful in a way, even though they're not a party. And they voted in record numbers 2 years ago and this year in the primary. It's also more expensive for candidates because you have a third group to reach out to.
Mhm.
And elections.
And we've got a
money.
couple of, yeah, and we've got a couple of questions, and this is, points of clarification. It looks like Peter has regarding our unaffiliated voters. So, Lynn, you shared that that we have Republicans and Democrats, and obviously the unaffiliated voters. We're seeing this trend where unaffiliated voters are the largest block that's here in Colorado. So, his question is asking in regard to the data points. Are you able to quickly quote off the top of your head
I am
what
so sorry,
that breakdown
I went on
looks
the
like?
Secretary of State website this morning and I copied stuff down, but I failed to copy that down. If you actually go to the Secretary of State's website, and I'm afraid to do it right now because I am the most techno-challenged person in the world. I will buzz off this call and not be able to figure out how to get back on. But just go to the Secretary of State website and look under like elections, and there'll be a data section, and it'll show you active voters are really what matter. Active voters are who gets a mail ballot sent to them. And of course, mail ballots is the big story of this election.
Mhm. And so we've included that link that Lynn is referencing that's off of the Secretary of State site. You'll see it broken down by counties, and then it'll show you the unaffiliated Democrats, Republicans, active, and of course the inactive, the active being the bulk of the folks that she was referencing. So Peter has a lot of questions. I'm going to try and condense a few, and then I'll pull up some of the others. So so we're fluctuating between independent or unaffiliated. Sometimes people are confused by the terminology. Unaffiliated, you would classify the same as an independent voter.
It's unaffiliated. The reason we don't use independent is in some states, independent is a separate party. It's an actual party like Capital Independent. So reporters tend not to use it. And basically it is. When somebody says, I'm an independent, they tell you in Colorado, I'm an independent, they're an unaffiliated voter. But I always think it's a misnomer too, because the whole entire time, whether I was registered Republican, Democrat, or unaffiliated, I never voted a straight party ticket. And I was one of those true people that split my ticket on major races. So that's another reason. You can be an Democrat and be very independent. Sherry John was the most independent Democrat I ever met.
Mm-hmm. I see Councillor Voles is on here with us, Melissa Snyder, and a couple of others. Thank you for hopping on and tuning in. So this question came to us earlier on from Peter, and this relates to a lot of what we're hearing nationally. So we're seeing some issues as it relates to our post office and mail-in ballots, and then we're hearing, the lack of funding or lack of registration boxes that are there for people to be able to turn in their ballots, and the concern that obviously they won't be able to have their voice heard. So Peter is referencing, Colorado has had this already for a few years now, ever since it's been offered. He's saying basically, I would think that could be more of the norm in Colorado, vote mail in ballot for the years even to come.
Well, what's interesting is Colorado actually, remember Douglas Bruce? Mm-hmm. When he passed Tabor in 1992, one of the provisions was that you would vote mail ballot in the off-year elections when you decide tax issues, bond issues, that sort of thing. So, and then it changed where you no longer had to have a reason to vote absentee. You could just sign up and have absentee ballots absentee mail-in ballots automatically sent to you. So many people requested those ballots that the Clerks Association in 2013 got the legislature to make Colorado a mostly all ballot state. I say mostly because you can still go to, each county has like a polling service center where you can walk in person if your ballot didn't arrive or that sort of thing. But there has been such talk about mail ballots and them being dangerous that longtime Republican county clerks were hearing from their voters here in Colorado, like, I'm worried about mail ballots. Are they safe? And they're like, you've been voting mail ballots since 2003. And they're like, oh. I will say that I think it's legitimate to have concerns about the nation. Colorado, this has been like a 2-3 decade process to get us to where we have what's considered the best system in the country. We consistently rank high in voter turnout, all those things that matter. But it didn't get there overnight. There were some things to work out. And so I think they'll be interesting to watch the night of the election. You might remember in some close races here in Colorado, you didn't find out what happened that night, in part because mail ballots take so much longer to process. And so you might be, do you remember the slavery issues on the ballot? I worked for the Secretary of State's office at the time, and I was fielding calls from all over the world wanting to know the result of that. And it took a good week to clarify it.
Wow. Well, and then, I know there have been other concerns from, especially last election where we had one of the counties that was waiting on ballots to come in. And as a result, there was a complete difference on the results once they all came in at once. And so that is something that's a source of confusion for folks, or concern really more so than anything. So Sherry John, I want you to touch a little bit about your road to becoming unaffiliated, but more so how you feel that has helped empower your voice over just retaining the party that you were belonging to.
Sure, that's a great question, one that I have been asked many times now. Things have changed really dramatically since I started in the House of Representatives in 2001, and I served for 8 years there, and then I ran for the Senate. And I have to tell you, in 2014, when I was first knocking doors, I knocked doors every single year because I believed that you should be connected to your district, not the party, but the district. And so the only way I could do that was to be in public all the time and knocking on doors, which was my favorite part to do in the campaigns. But what I noticed in 2014, people were so incredibly angry. There was just this anger that they did not feel like they were being represented by either party. And I could identify with them because I have always had an independent voice, because I was trained when I first got into the House that you represent your district. You don't just represent Democrats or Republicans or unaffiliated. You represent the whole district, and everybody has a voice, and that voice, they have a right to be heard. And so that really started sinking in with me in 2014 as I was campaigning. And I also identified with people that, when you're with a party, whichever party it is, they have had more control, and you're expected to vote with the party. Well, that bothered me tremendously because, again, I've always had an independent voice, and there was times I didn't agree with that, and I just couldn't do it. And so I would make my independent vote and be on the outs with people in my party or the other party. I just believed in following issues and true policy. It should be about policy, not politics. It shouldn't be about the parties. It should be about people. Everyone should be included. And so as I moved further through, and I had 1 year left, during that last year, the 2017, that was the year before I changed parties, it just really started bothering me because I had seen more and more on both sides that there were really big time outside interests that really were having a huge say in what the party's legislation was going to look like, what the policies were going to be, who they were going to support in elections, where they were going to put those dollars, and really big dollars coming in from the outside. And I just felt that they had too much control. They had too much power. And it really went against how I had believed for all of those years. And so I just made the decision that I truly didn't want to be a party going into my last session. I wanted to be who I truly was and identify as that. And yes, it did cause quite a stir. But I have to tell you, everybody was very respectful of my decision. I was kind of a loner. I caucused by myself, not a party. And the interesting thing was, both sides actually had to come and ask me where I was on an issue, not just assume, which they kind of never had anyway, because I was independent. But I just believe that you represent people, not parties. That's just real important to me.
But Sherry, I'm going to interrupt here when you talk about I've always campaigned in the whole district and all that. You're in Jefferson County.
Correct.
Jefferson County is a swing county. I mean, quite frankly, in Denver, I laughed. When I lived in Highlands Ranch, I was a Democrat. There was no one to vote for. There was nobody, And then when I moved to Denver, everybody on my ballot, everybody's, a Democrat. So, you went from, all Republican to all Democrat. So some counties are like that. I think you're blessed in living in a swing county. It's less swing now just because everything is so trending blue right now. And, I'm not so sure we'd be trending as blue as we are if Hillary Clinton had won in 2016. That's my opinion. I think this is such an anti-Trump factor.
I have to respond to your comment, Lynn. You're absolutely right. And I was told from day one in my elections over the 18 years that I ran, I served 16, but the rest of it you're campaigning. It was made very, very clear that you have got to be able to reach the unaffiliated voters. They are the ones that are going to make a difference. And then as I became more seasoned and people really did see, I didn't always have the support of everyone in the Democratic Party, that was absolutely a fact. I absolutely needed to pull the support of unaffiliated voters, because they don't just vote straight line most of the time.
So we talk about, looking at the issues more so than the party. And I feel like, over the years, we've continued to deviate from this. And so what advice can you give to the public? All of the unaffiliated get bombarded from both sides. And both sides, like I like to say, it's when you go to a grocery store, you remember waiting in the line, you'd see the Teen People magazine, the 17, the Mary Claire, all different covers, right? Different ways that they're trying to word things, but it's all essentially the same. Like, you can only put lipstick on a pig too many times. But the point being, they're getting the messaging from the different parties. Some of them are intentionally or maybe unintentionally doing this, but they're focusing on something through their lens to try and convince the voter of their perspective or opinion. So how can people truly look at the issue unbiasedly?
Well, I think that's gotten harder and harder. One thing is people tend to look at what supports their belief. You can go on the website for two people running for the same office, and everybody wants a better education. Everybody wants better roads. We want senior citizens. We believe in helping the disabled and all that. But it's just how people get there that is so different that it's hard to, it's just really hard. I don't think people, a lot of this has been changed by the internet too, I think. It used to be news. When you ran for office, it was news when we said it was news. When we got your facts, remember those, and we wrote a little story on it. But now people have their own web pages, they have Twitter, they have all of that. And I actually, although social media parts of it are great, I think social media is what has led to this just ugly attacks in our country.
Lynn, I have to agree with you. And one of the things that I did always notice, and I would so encourage the voters to really become educated on the issue, not the soundbite, not if it sounds like a good idea, but what I would do is literally go through all of the bills and really drill down to what does it really mean and what does it do. I like what it says it's going to do, but what are the consequences and the unintended consequences of what the legislation is going to do. And sadly, more and more over the years, I found that people really do just look at the title of something and it becomes a soundbite. They really need to take time to talk to their legislators, to research, to find out exactly what does it mean, and to have a really good communication with their legislators. I don't care which side of the aisle they're on. I think that that's important, and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable.
Thank you. And I also see with us Rebecca and Kimberly. Thank you as well for hopping on here with us. Lynn, you shared a great point earlier, and this was, had it been Hillary that was in office, it probably, Colorado has always been a little bit more of a purple, right? Purple balance that's there and easily swung more so toward one and the other, but not to the extreme that this past election had brought forward. That being said, can you touch on why it's not in the best interest to have just one party? And I always say this, I know Sherry John has heard it from me, I respect the diversity of different thoughts in the room. One party that is ruling and is the only one that's in the room does not reflect everybody and their thought process. But I want it from your lens because I know you're the expert in this.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm the expert, but I will tell you this. When John Hickenlooper was elected governor in 2010, Hickenlooper's a Democrat. And the Republicans took control of the House by 1 seat. The Senate was Democrat. And Bill Owens told Hickenlooper, it's easier for you that it's a split legislature, because then bills don't, I mean, Owens is first, Owens was the first Republican to sit in that seat in 24 years when he was elected in 1998. And of course, back then, if you were a Democrat and under the, you had a Republican controlled legislature and a Republican governor, you didn't get a bill passed unless you'd been given the green light ahead of time. And so the 5 bills that Bill Owens vetoed were from his fellow Republicans. And they were so angry that he had to invite them to the mansion for kind of a kiss and make-up lunch. I think a split legislature, it was funny, the whole time Republicans were in charge, I'd be like, they're so mean, they're so terrible. If only Democrats could gain control, then Democrats did. And at one point I'm like, they're so out of control, And in fact, when I switched to unaffiliated, somebody said to me, why didn't you go back to Democrat? Because you were one, in my entire life, I've been a Democrat longer than anything else, although almost the same as a Republican. And I said, have you seen what's going on in the legislature? I mean, you have extreme all Democrat control. And I think there's some things that are going on, some things that are said that aren't necessarily, good for the state. I will say it's interesting how Democratic lawmakers get so mad at the governor because they, just like the Republicans did, they expect their own to support everything they want. But yeah, I know when I talk to, especially the business community, they pray for a split legislature, saying it's the only chance Colorado has. I've been there when Democrats had everything for a couple of years, and it was good. Bill Ritter was a good governor.
I would like to also jump in on that one because I have to tell you, I believe that you have a more in-depth conversation and collaboration when you have split chambers, because they have to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And you have one party that's in control. They seem to have the attitude that, well, we really don't need the other side because we have control. So we don't really need them. We don't need their votes. We can pass it. And I have had so many people call me this past year that have, said, what can you do? And it's like, well, I can do nothing. I'm not there anymore. But their concern has been that literally they had legislators on the Democrat side, because they're the ones that are in control right now, saying to the Republicans and in public, well, it doesn't matter because we have the majority, so we don't need to talk to them. Mm-hmm. You see, that is what's wrong with the country. It shouldn't be them and us. It should be all about coming together as the state, coming together as the country, and you have to talk to each other. That's not a bad thing. But I just know that when there's one party in control, whichever way it goes, they seem to think they don't need the other side, and they don't have honest, good dialogues, because generally, you're right, Juliet, at the end of the day, everybody wants pretty much the same thing on 95 to 97% of the stuff. It's how you get there, but you end up with better policy when you have everyone at the table.
Well, and one fallacy is that every bill is a blow up. I mean, almost every bill gets passed with bipartisan support, but it's the biggies that everybody fights about,
Yeah.
whether it's family leave or whether it's a tax measure. I think it's interesting to note that when Bill Owens enacted permanent tax cuts as the governor, nearly every Democrat in the Senate went along with him. Because at the time, it's hard to remember that Colorado was bringing in so much money. It was like it could print money, and people are like, yeah, we shouldn't be taking this money. A very small few cautioned, this is a history of boom bust state. You're crazy, because if you make a tax cut permanent, you have to go back to voters, and that's really hard. I think another impact on politics in this state, you have one is social media, because you have a lot of anonymous attacks. The other is Amendment 41, which our governor, Jared Polis, put on the ballot back when he was just on the Board of Education, a layman. It basically, it sounds great, ethics in government, limits how much money, influence buying and all that. Well, we weren't a really bad state to begin with. And that could have been written in such a measure that you couldn't accept tickets to the Masters and some of the more outrageous thing. But it is illegal for a lobbyist to buy a lawmaker even a cup of coffee. And I think what happened before is your lunches were much more intermingled, R&D, but now they're not. I mean, it's much more, it used to be like if you were there late at night, you'd order in food, everybody would eat together. Now the Republicans order their food, the Democrats order their food. And then I think another huge mistake was when they remodeled the Capitol and moved lawmakers into an office building across the street. They should have moved staff. So it used to be when you walked into that building during the session, like every day felt like you were in Target the day after Thanksgiving. You could barely walk through the halls. Well, now, because everybody's offices were there, so everybody met with them. Well, now half the offices are across the street, so people aren't there. And it's just such a different attitude. I mean, I know everybody always says, I'm glad I covered it. It was like that when I covered it. But I still think that was a huge detriment. And when you talk to some people, they said, we predicted this, and they wouldn't listen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a different dynamic when they're entirely separate from where people are going, and think that they'll be able to interface with everybody right on the spot that's there. Sherry John, you shared, and I have a question for you, and then the question for Lynn before we kind of do last minute remarks that are out there. You shared, one of the ways that we can avoid those messaging that are coming out to try and push us to vote one way or another rather than factual driven is to deep dive into the details of those bills. Ballot issues are one of those that come up, and they're sensational with their line item. That's generally how people know about them. They very seldom will read into it until they're at the poll site, if they even do. And if they do start reading at the poll site, then they'll, realize that a lot of the text in there adds to what they had first heard, and more than likely they'll just vote with the predisposed idea that they came in with. So especially as it relates to ballot issues, we're seeing more and more that continue to get piled up on our elections every time we have an election. What can voters do from that regard? And is it any different than going into the detail? But where else can they turn to for that information and support?
They have a really good explanation when you get your blue book, it's called. Each voter will be mailed what's called the blue book, and it will have both sides of the issues in that blue book. Take the time to go in and read it, because it's the proponents of why it's so necessary is written, and then the comments from the opposition as to why it would not be a good thing to do. And then as your legislators are having town halls, And online now, my goodness, you can get so much online. Just ask the pros and cons so that you can really weigh out. So really, what is this going to do, and not just go by what it sounds like it's going to do.
Excellent, thank you. And then Lynn, this is a time that I feel like we're hearing, go exercise your right to vote. We always hear it around the time of voting, and then it kind of dissipates for a little bit. But now it's this urgency of everybody needs to get out. Whoever you are, let's make sure you get out. Is voting now more important than it was last year, or even tomorrow? And if it's not, this sense of urgency that's there, how do we change the dynamic behind, go out and vote? But vote when you're informed and you fully are aware of what's going on, so you're not just digesting information and turning that back out to support the people that are pushing you to do that.
I write a column for Colorado Politics, which is the political arm of the Colorado Springs Gazette, and my upcoming column is all about how this is the most important election in our lifetime. Again, because we hear that every time. I mean, you will hear people that said, I sat out in 2016 and I didn't think Trump would get elected, and I mobilized. And I mean, but when I laugh is when you say, and be informed, because I had a friend that stood in line behind somebody in the 2008 election, and everybody knew Obama was going to win. And she said, does he move into the White House tomorrow? Like, no concept that there's an inauguration, no concept of, I mean, voters are in, I mean, I hate to say this, but I just talked to somebody who said, well, my family that lives in Colorado is very upset that Jared Polis didn't reveal he was gay when he ran for governor in 2018. Okay, let me see. When Jared Polis won his congressional race in 2008, the headline in the Rocky Mountain News, Colorado elects first gay congressman. People, get informed. It's amazing when you tell people things and they go, that's not true. That's not true. All elections are important. It drives me nuts when people say, I always vote the straight party ticket. I've never done that. And on ballot measures, I will say that the vast majority, I'm a no vote for the reason of the unintended consequences. When Amendment 41, the ethics measure, passed, and people were like saying, oh my gosh, I work for the state, and my kid probably can't accept this scholarship. Everybody was like, well, I didn't know that's what it was going to do. That's because you read it was about, ethics in government. Might as well have called it kittens and puppies, and you can't undo the harm of some of these. We're still trying. There's a measure this fall to undo Gallagher from the 70s, which it's great for property homeowners like me. It keeps our taxes lower, but it destroys business in Colorado. It destroys it.
And while we're at, we're close to our 40-minute mark. So before I kind of start closing out our broadcast, are there comments that we didn't get to that I know you guys would like the listeners to hear? We have a diverse group of people that tune into this from people not just in Westminster, but it's residents, it's businesses. I've had out-of-state folks even on this broadcast today that are tuned in. I see Stephen Van Dyke and Chantel. So a lot of different audiences that we're capturing. Is there further messaging that you would like to get out before we start closing out and commenting on the next few steps?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say vote, but I'm also going to say, even pre all this COVID and all that, please remember it takes time for ballots. You were talking about election switching, somebody's down, somebody's up. Well, Denver has been a community that people a lot of times vote the last 2 days of an election, and then it takes a while to count those ballots. Let's go back 2014. Cory Gardner's up 7 percentage points when in the night. He ends up winning the U.S. Senate race over Mark Udall by less than 2 percentage points because Denver and Boulder came in. So I used to vote on the last day. Never. Now I wait till at least the Friday before. Make it easier for your clerks.
And the other thing, please just remember that you can also take them to the drop boxes that are being provided in safe places. You know, here in Wheat Ridge, they have one right over at the city hall and the police station. So you can take it to the drop boxes, which are very, very safe. So you don't have to worry about mailing it. And they have those all over.
I would never mail a ballot. Has nothing to do with the post office. I would never mail a ballot.
Nope.
Why? When you can have a drop box that's empty twice a day.
Well, Lynn, I'm holding ground on being one of the last to always vote, and I am one of those that goes in person and votes at those different polling sites. So it's just how I've used to doing it, and I continue to do it that way. But I'll try and be more considerate for those clerks.
But if you go in person, you're voting on a machine. Yours is recorded automatically.
See?
People who turn in a mail ballot, you know, it's people who turn in mail ballots on 7 p.m. And then you've got to have a bipartisan team, look at them, inspect them, look at the signature, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
Vote.
Yes, and every vote truly does make a difference. That's there. I had a friend that was running out in one of our county commissioner seats, and he literally came short about one vote. So it does make a difference. So go out there and vote. We've captured a lot of the comments from both Lynn and Sherry John into the comment section of this broadcast. Touch on a variety of different topics, the lens of an unaffiliated voter, of a lens of an unaffiliated reporter who also wore the hat of a Democrat Republican and is now conscious that maybe I'll keep on the moderate side and kind of review the issues and everything from the lens that I'm in, because each party has become so much more polarized than the years past. We've also included information for you on what you should be doing as you get your ballots out, and that's reading more about them. And yes, it's okay to get your sources from whichever party you're affiliated with, but really in trying to understand the meat behind it, the details, because as the saying always goes, the devil's in the details. It's valid for a reason. Something might sound great, but how you reach that issue or that initiative that they're wanting to get done may not necessarily coalesce with where you are in life. I see Brian Head, Brian Dice, John Archer, all of you are hopping on right now. This broadcast is going to be available to you to rewind and rewatch at any point in time. And when you do, please be sure to give us that hashtag replay. Let us know that you've tuned in. If you think of a comment or question that you didn't get a chance to ask us, be sure to type that into the comment section. We'll get that out to our two speakers with us. And if there's something that you're not comfortable asking out to the public, you can always DM it to our page. We won't share that out except for who would need to answer that for you, and we'll come back and give you those answers as well. Today is Friday before Labor Day, so Monday I hope you guys are taking some time to go take care of yourselves. Be surrounded by people either that you love dearly or no one at all, somewhere outdoors, and keep safe and healthy. That being said, our mayoral broadcast that we generally host on Monday is actually now going to be postponed until the following Monday. So the mayor will be unavailable with us on Monday, but that does not mean that I will not be live. I have information that I need to share with you about my awards gala. So I hope that you guys tune in on Monday at 11 a.m. to see how we're going to do that event. Truly a hybrid into the future, as the theme of it is designed to be. Katie, thank you for chiming in and sharing about the Colorado Politics subscription. And she avidly reads you, Lynn, and Marianne all the time. So know that you have somebody that's tuned in to that as well. We also have Wayne sharing that this information is terrific. Wayne, in the past, has been a Broomfield County Commissioner and is, of course, on our board, so he's highly engaged. It looks like we have a last question. I'm going to ask this before I firmly close out, and this comes to us from Brian. I'll read it quickly since it's covering your face up, Lynn, and I want people to see you smiling and chatting back with us. But asking, the politicalization of the votes, do you think that this will impact the turnout? So with the president contesting the validity of those mail-in ballots and our own Secretary of State being overtly partisan, more so than any other in recent memory. So it's a two-folded question. Again, if the politicalization of voting will impact turnout, one, as a result of the national scrutiny on the validity of mail-ins, and then the secondary being as a result of the state of Colorado's Secretary of State, who has appeared to be more overtly partisan than in past.
Sherry, do you want to do any of this?
I personally think that voter turnout is going to be greater. Probably because of all of that people are really wanting to make sure that they, do make their voice heard. Lynn, I will be anxious to hear what you say with your Secretary of State.
That was the one I was hoping you would handle, Sherry.
Oh,
Well, look, in 2016, I had a county clerk in a very small rural county tell me she couldn't believe how many people in her county weren't registered to vote. And she never realized it until they came in and said, I thought I better vote because they said Hillary Clinton might win. So there is that polarization that's driving everything. Both sides want to say, ha, 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 got you. And they're going to send everybody to the polls. And I will say that, yes, what is going on in the Secretary of State's office is very interesting. If Wayne Williams, a Republican, had behaved like that, my gosh, it would have been the end of the world. Sherry, you can add what you want.
well, I have to agree. I mean, I think that is, I have to tell you that one of the greatest county clerks that I have always admired was in Jefferson County. And you never knew what party she was in because she handled it so well. And that's Pam Anderson. She literally treated that office because it served everyone. And that is a position that I believe should be for the better of everyone in the state. And it should not be made a partisan, where you're out there doing the commercials and stuff, making it a partisan position. That's just my opinion.
I like having them elected, but you got to elect the right people.
Well, thank you both for being so candid. That's one of the reasons why I was most interested in having you on here with us, not just to be able to information share, but to do so, rather bluntly, with no filter that's there, and come out and tell people, and I know it's not, we're always going to peeve one person or another, but when it's real and when it's the truth, that's when we want it out there. And so I appreciate and admire both of you for the work that you're doing. That you've done already, but that you'll continue to do for the great state of Colorado. We need more people that are out there championing from the various capacities that they're in, the importance and the why behind understanding things that surround voting, but also policy and how that affects our community at large. So we're at the top of our 45-minute mark. I appreciate both of our guests for being here. And of course, I appreciate you all for enjoying this broadcast, for tuning in and engaging with us. And we will see you on Monday morning, but thank you both. Please stay on here with me as I exit out, and everyone have a terrific Labor Day.
You won't see them on Monday. I thought you said you won't see them.
Terrific Labor Day weekend. You can replay my video, Lynn.
Okay. All right, everybody. There's your picnic plans.
Right. Cancel your picnic plans until I'm done with the broadcast.
In front of your screen with your potato salad.
Yes, with your potato salad. And be sure to send me some too. I can always use that. Yes, I agree with you, Katie. We do need more conversation. I appreciate that. All people are welcome on this broadcast. Before I close out, we did have a transportation one the other day, and I knew it was going to raise some comments because of who the guests were that I had on here. But I said it, and I said it then, I'll say it now. We bring all perspective. And whether or not you agree with one or another, is designed for others to hear all of the perspectives and to truly select which one they align with and agree. And so part of this broadcast was to do that, to give you the lens of, from all sides, what people should see and think. But I appreciate you, Katie, because we are trying to bring in all different types of insights on here. Enjoy the weekend with or without a potato salad, with your phone, or later after you're back. And thank you to both Sherry, John, and Lynn.
Thanks for having me. You run a great program.
Oh, thank you.
It's really good online. All right, thanks.